Welcome everyone. In today's video, we are going to learn with you one of the aggressive gambits that you can play once your opponent pushes pawn to e5. And it stands for the King's Gambit. And once you push this pawn to f4, your opponent might have two options. And it's definitely accepting gambit or declining it. We're gonna make a separate video about the accepted variation, but here we are going to see with you three most common declined moves that black can do after you push the pawn f4, and that stands for d6, d5 and knight 6 variations. So let's get started. Let's first start by taking a look once black goes to the pawn to d6, and it's basically black is playing that because we were attacking the pawn on e5 and black is trying to defend it. And we go with the knight f3. Keep in mind, not with the bishop, with the knight, because by playing knight f3 you're not only developing the knight, but at the same time you are taking the control of queen h4 check. Knight c6, you make the normal development, black is also trying the same. And at this point try to pay attention to this position very closely, because this is most oftentimes this type of structure that you will put against the King's Gambit. And in the King's Gambit, you don't need to make the full development in order to start the attack. This is actually kind of enough development for the white, because by doing that, we are kind of ready to attack on the black's kingside part. And at the same time, we don't want to spend another 2-3 tempos for this queenside development, otherwise our opponent will be able to put his pieces on the right spots, and we can kind of miss our tactical possibilities. Once we castle here, the two most played moves would be knight f6 and pinning the knight by playing knight d4, pinning the queen. Let's first start with the knight d4 move, because it's kind of interesting, because it's already your opponent is putting the pin and kind of the pressure without castling. Well, so far we understood that in the King's Gambit, our goal is kind of to make the castling as soon as possible. It's kind of like kingside development, as you can see, and to start the attack after that. At the same time, another thing, try to follow that. In the King's Gambit, once you made the development, you need to make the breakthrough immediately. That means you need to start the attack. And f7 is your favorite square when you're playing the King's Gambit. The reason is that the most of the combinations in this gambit are connected with the f7 square. Even here. Once black plays here knight d4, we have the opportunity to sack the bishop on f7, and by doing that, king takes, we have a discovered check. We are attacking the king. At the same time, since the bishop undefended, we can simply take the bishop in the next move. King goes back. We are taking. It's already white has a winning position on the board, but let's take a look a little more deeper, because at this moment black is actually going to take our free rook. Should we really worry about it, or should we really take it seriously? Nope. Let him to take all the pieces on the queen side. But we know the chess game can be finished easily once you checkmate your opponent's king. And that's here our main target, and we are going for it. We're gonna take the pawn. So let's add the rook here to the party by opening up the F file. And our opponent is still busy by taking the free rook on the board. And here already the kind of critical situation for the white, since our queen, the knight and the rook, even the pawn, kind of participating in the attack. Since you have enough pieces already focusing on the attack, it's time to make another sacrifice. Rook goes to f8 check, king is forced to take it, and simply by playing knight e6, we are forking the queen and the king, and in the next move, we will take the queen, even pawn on g7. Well, definitely here black need to try to play king f7, but still in the current situation, white is absolutely winning. Black is really in a huge trouble. Alright, we saw here that knight d4 immediately gives a winning opportunity for the white perspective, and let's just see the most played move here. What if just black tries to make the normal development? Well, knight f6, and the same thing for the white perspective. We also make our development, bishop e7, and it's a moment that kind of the placement of the black piece is okay unless this bishop on g4, because once black castles, again knight d4 is opportunity coming up for the black perspective. And that's why we will prevent this sort of idea of black very quickly, and by pushing that h3 pawn. So by playing h3, we are just saying to the bishop, take it or leave it, you know. If it lives, it's already fine position for the white. But if he retreats back the bishop h5, it's even more better for white, because bishop simply will get trapped since all the light squares are being controlled by the pawns of white. So bishop h5 is definitely not an option that your opponent can go for. So, and going passively also not the case that your opponent should consider. And most people will capture here the knight on f3. We will take back with the queen, and now knight jumps to d4, so to attack it, queen f2, castles. We can make the development without really taking seriously this knight on d4, but we cannot since it's placed really well. So that's why we'll just say hi to knight by pushing our pawn. Knight goes back, and here white will play queen e2. And this is actually a little bit smart move here for white, because if you try to make a development whether like a bishop e3 or knight d2 move, let's just say bishop e3, your opponent can immediately go like this sort of break from the center, and it's actually not good for the white. And by playing queen e2, we are kind of preventing two things of black, and that is first stopping the knight h5 move, so black cannot enter to our field. And at the same time, d5 would not be possible since we can capture the pawn, and after some exchange, we are ending up taking extra pawn of black, and it's winning already for the white perspective. And that's why after queen e2, black can try anything he wants. Let's just say if he takes the pawns, you're taking back with the bishop. And in the current situation, white is absolutely better than the black. It's thanks to our two pair of bishops. At the same time, in the next one, we can just by playing d4, we can also gain the control over the center. Knight c6. Should I use the same plan or the same setup against it? Yeah, nothing wrong with it. You will develop the knight to f3. And basically the reason why your opponent playing knight c6, again, it's kind of defending the pawn. If you take it, he can take back. But you're gonna play knight f3. And after playing knight f3 in this position, your opponent, if pushes a pawn to d6, it is basically transposition toward the previous second move d6 variation. But let's see here another possible option. How about if the knight goes f6? And the idea behind this move is that, well, if you will take the pawn, black is going to take your e4 pawn. Kind of fair exchange. But let's go deeper, how we should play next after that. You will push the pawn with the tempo to d3. Knight retreats back since it's on the option. Otherwise, all these squares are being controlled by the white pieces. So knight c5, d4. And after d4, it is already black is getting into trouble because black is having very hard time to find the good spot for this knight. Because knight d6 is not the case for the black at all, because simply we are forking both of the knights. And if knight takes a place on the e4, well, in this position we can simply go to pawn to d5. Knight retreats back, and after that we can just simply go queen d4. Absolutely, black is terrible in this position, so definitely knight e4 is also not a good option for black to consider. And lastly, we left with the knight a6 move, and definitely knight a6 is not a good spot. It's not like it looks good for the black perspective, but what black can do, it was the only option for him to go. And once knight takes the place on a6, again the usual plan. Bishop takes place c4, being prepared to make something happen on f7. queen e7, we develop our knight to c3, and just the moves that right now white is doing is autopilot. You develop the knight, you develop the bishop, and now you develop another knight, and simply by playing knight c3 we are also now preparing knight g5 move, so we can immediately start to attack our favorite square on f7. And keep in mind, when you're playing the King's Gambit, the idea is definitely to start the attack as soon as possible, but do not do it without castling. For example, here, why not we jumped off to the knight g5, and the reason was simple. Yes, we are threatening something, we started the attack, but the problem is we can simply face here the counter-attack move, and that's not good news for the white. And that's why we are just, first of all, doing the preparing mode, so we can prepare the pieces, and then we can go for the attack. h6, prophylaxis, to not let the white knight to get on g5, but here we'll simply castle. And I think this position no needs any comment, because by just looking it's very clear white is just doing fine at this current position. And now time for the d5 folk pair counter gambit, and I would say the people who usually play against King's Gambit just simply telling that by pushing this move, well, you choose the aggressive gambit against me, let me just support you. d5 usually will lead to interesting variations where a lot of tactical situations can happen. Alright, again here d5. Well, usually after d5 you can accept the pawn, but again, what I would recommend you to develop the knight to f3. This is another option that will give the better position for the white. And by playing knight f3, what's going on is that you're attacking the pawn on e5 and you are trying to take that pawn. And after you go to knight f3, most people here captured d takes e4. Well, how about e takes f4? E takes f4 is pretty simple here to play. You're just gonna take the pawn and queen takes back. With the tempo you develop the knight to c3. It is probably reminding you the Scandinavian setup, which basically, yeah, definitely some pawns are not kind of consisting on the e7 and f2, but it is reminding kind of the same position at this current situation. And here after queen e6, you go king f2, and I'll just show you quickly that what sort of like a possible idea you can play here. Bishop b6 and then bishop b5 check with the rook e1 idea. We don't need to go very deep in this variation because the moves will just become autopilot. So as we can see, you just take the pawn, queen takes, the knight develops, your king can get under the check, you got that king f2, bishop c5, you blockade the check, you make another check, and simply what you're doing is that castling by hand. And the white is absolutely fine. But most people after knight f3 move captured e4 pawn, and you will take back knight e5. So by taking knight e5, the most two common moves that black played here, developing his minor piece on the kingside part, was the knight f6 and bishop d6. Do not worry about this sort of just small threats. Queen h4, it's only check, because you can just blockade it and fiancate your bishop and castle. That's not even the move should be considered here. But how about bishop d6 and knight f6? Let's first start with the bishop d6 move. What's the idea behind this move? Well, probably since black is developing the bishop to d6 but not other spots, he really wants to take your knight and create the vulnerable pawn on the e5, since our pawn will get the opponent's field. And after bishop d6, as usual, our light square bishop will take the place on c4, hitting on the f7. And black is kind of forced to take it. Offering the bishop trades is not the possibility for black at all, because you're just taking, and tactical situation here happening. By giving the check, blockading not the case, we are just taking, and after takes, white is simply the exchange in this current situation. So bishop e6 will lead to quick losing position for the black, and that's why black need to take the one of the attackers of the white that is putting the pressure on f7. Bishop e5. Here, interesting situation that, which probably you're expecting, probably will take the bishop on e5. Well, yeah, that's a first move that will cross our mind if you're playing this position for the first time. But if you have the knowledge, you will choose different direction. And if I'm not mistaken, we have the pattern called Zwischenzang, and that's basically, instead of expected move, you'll make a different move that threatens some of the piece or like a field of your opponent. And here, after bishop e5, rather than taking this bishop, we have kind of, I don't know if you really can call it brilliant move, but still looks really good, queen h5. By doing that, we are delaying the bishop, but at the same time, black really doesn't have the time to save his bishop. Otherwise, he can get checkmated on f7 square. So he really needs a defender here. And that would be by playing queen e7. And now we will take that with our queen. Queen takes, pawn takes, knight e6. As I mentioned that once our pawn got e5, it became a little bit vulnerable because it's our opponent's field. And right now, we don't really have the option to defend it. We can do bishop b5, but sooner or late, after playing like these sort of moves, black can win our pawn on e5. Rather than doing that, we have even way more stronger continuation here, and that is just playing b3, definitely letting the black to take our pawn on e5. But we should not also forget that the pawn of black is also in our field, and that is also vulnerable at the same time. We go bishop b2, attacking the knight. Black really cannot take our bishop, since we will win the exchange in the current situation. What black need to do would be here, playing f6, and now we go the bishop to d5. And next move we are just taking the pawn e4. White got two pair of bishops, much more space for the white pieces, and it's really easy to go with the white perspective in the current situation. Instead of bishop d6, your opponent might go to knight f6, developing the kingside knight. And here still the plan for white doesn't change. We go bishop c4, hitting on f7 pawn. And the only correct continuation for black stands for here to offer to trade the light square bishops, even though black got the double pawns in the current situation. And after that, here white plays queen e2. It's currently the best and strong move for the white. Since black got here the problem on this double pawn, simply right now black has the problem with the pawn structure, and it's especially the weakness on this e file that stands for double pawns. And by playing queen e2, white is preparing the next move knight c3, so we can start attacking this vulnerable pawn on e4. Bishop c5 tries to stop white from castling, but we will not really take it seriously because our plan is completely different. It is going to attack this pawn on e4. Knight c3, currently we have two attackers against one defender, so black need to try to add another one, and that would be stands for queen d4. But rather than queen d4, if your opponent like castles or ignores it, there's nothing wrong. You can just take the pawn and make the queenside castling with the extra pawn. White is winning here. Knight c3, pressure is on e4. Black definitely need to play queen d4 here. And currently, if he had another piece that would be really fine, would be really great for white, because we could have added another pressure. Unfortunately, we can't. But still, if plan A is not working, we're gonna go for plan B. We will just say our opponent, okay, I want really to attack your e4 pawn, but you did a great job by defending it. But now I'm gonna put the pressure to your another weakness. Well, we will see how well now we're gonna do here. Knight e3 is simply we are attacking the on e6, and black has here trick move, just castling. by giving up the pawn. Here we can take the pawn on e6, but it becomes kind of risky since our king in the center, and in the next move black is threatening the rook e8, the pin stuff. I think it's very easy to go wrong for the white perspective. What we will do here is that simply we will develop bishop d2, just delaying to take the queen e6, and once our opponent goes knight 6, well, here we can just take it, king h8, and now since we are able to castle on the queen side, nothing to worry about these sort of threats of black. It would be just only attacking the queen. We will simply can go back and enjoy the rest of the game with the extra pawn. And now there's a chess puzzle for you all. So this position comes from one of the variations of the King's Gambit, and it's currently white's turn to play. And it feels like whatever white plays here, it's kind of already clearly losing position for the black. But the person who is playing with the white didn't took really to finish the game in just simple way. He wanted something creative and special. And in the current position, he played queen h5 move. What do you think? It is about his gambit, or it was really like a genius move by white? Please share your answers in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. Peace.